Welcome into the Big Ten Huddle, where we talk everything Big Ten. I am your host, JR. We talk every Big Ten team, Big Ten football, Big Ten basketball. We talk every Big Ten team. We bring you shows, live shows. We share notes, opinions, rumors, everything else. We get it all for you on this channel. So if you are a Big Ten football fan, a Big Ten basketball fan, you'll want to subscribe to this channel. Give this video a like while you're doing that. Helps us, the algorithm, all that different fancy stuff. So if you could just help us out, like, subscribe, go ahead. That's great. Thank you so much for doing that. Today, we're going to be covering Will Howard and some of his comments that he made prior to this Rose Bowl game of Oregon versus Ohio State. Now, this game is huge. The media attention is out of this world. I mean, there's so much online about it. I feel like this is one of those games where you just cannot get enough, and there's so many previews, so that's why I'm making a couple of these videos. I just made a video on the Oregon flu rumors as well, so if you want to go check that one out, kind of dissect that, give my analysis on whether I think it's true or not, so go over and check that one out. Would definitely appreciate if you give that one a like as well. But let's talk about these Will Howard comments, because Will Howard, when the team arrived, he made some comments about Ohio State's losses to Michigan and Oregon, which have stirred up a lot of reactions from fans. The media has gotten into it a little bit as well, but mostly from fans on social media and talking to one another. And I'm going to give my thoughts on it, and then I would love for you to comment and give me your thoughts as well. Here's some background, though. The two major losses for Ohio State happened this year against Oregon in Week 7. That was a 1-point loss where they lost while Will Howard was sliding down at the end of the game, trying to set up a field goal as time expired. It was a great game, the best game of the season in college football. I think if you choose any other game, you're just biased, because if you watch that game, you had one heck of a time enjoying it and having a great time with it. And then you have the loss to Michigan, where Ohio State's arch rival, it's their fourth time losing to them in a row. They were three score favorites in this one. I think 19.5 was the line by the end of it, but Michigan finished 7-5. Largely, I mean, that seventh win, they were supposed to finish 6-6 and lose to Ohio State, but they beat Ohio State. So they end up being 7-5, and Michigan fans are still celebrating the rivalry victory, as they should. I mean, arch rival, you've had a disappointing season. You beat your arch rival in a season of dreams for them. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that when you're having a disappointing season to take down your rival. Obviously, you're going to feel good about that. But the critical question that was posed to Will Howard about these two losses led him to say something that has Oregon and Michigan fans not feeling great about what he said. I'm going to play it for you. This comes from Juck on Bucks on Twitter, so I want to give him his credit there. Go follow Juck if you're an Ohio State fan. He posts a lot of good Ohio State stuff and just random college football stuff as well. So go follow Juck on Bucks, friend of the program. Here's what Will Howard had to say that is getting a lot of fan reaction in the college football space leading up to this Rose Bowl.
I think so. I think, you go back and watch the film and, I just didn't, and I'm hypercritical of myself, and I think we all are here, but I just look at it and I'm like, man, I don't think anyone this year beat us. I think we beat ourselves every time. And, you watch and we had the turnover, in our own 20-yard line. And they got the kick. That's two possessions they stole in the first half. And then, obviously the way the game ended, and we're still 1 point away, and that's what hurts. And it was a hostile environment at their place.
Will Howard doesn't believe that anybody has actually beaten Ohio State this season. It's been Ohio State that has beat themselves. We beat ourselves, he said. Oregon and Michigan fans, are obviously upset, reacting to this, interpreting this statement. Many Michigan fans interpreting this statement as excuse making, and many Oregon fans are interpreting this statement as disrespectful. And how could you say such a thing? Did we not play well enough to defeat you in that game? Both fan bases, in particular on social media, are perceiving Howard's word as downplaying essentially their team's wins, in saying that Ohio State was the reason why, instead of them playing well, which you can justify them being upset about that. You want recognition when your team plays well or you and your team gets a big win, especially a team like Michigan, right? Where your entire season's success rests upon this win. To hear, oh, it was just all Ohio State's fault, you actually did nothing to achieve that win. Now you're going to take some offense to that. I get that. But the perspective of Howard's comments, for me, these stem from a mindset that focuses on the idea of self motivation rather than excuse making. Listen, if you've been an athlete before in your life, you have thought about or been told, don't beat yourself. All right. And this is something that athletes will say all the time, maybe not always to the media, but this is something that athletes say to themselves, to the fellow athletes, to coaches, other people. Don't beat yourself. And it's not just in football, it's in baseball, it's in basketball. I mean, there are so many other athletes that say something like this. In particular, one of those athletes being JJ McCarthy of Michigan last year when he was being interviewed before the national championship game. QB JJ McCarthy said something very similar about their playoff losses to TCU in Georgia. This one's much quicker, but listen into what JJ had to say.
Different from the last 2 years was more about ourselves. How are we going to go out there and be the best version of ourselves? And at the end of the day, the last two playoff games, we were beating ourselves.
They were beating themselves. Now, he didn't exactly say it the same way as Will Howard, but the sentiment was the same, that they beat themselves. And this is something that athletes say, like I said, all the time. High level athletes will often frame losses this way as a means of staying motivated and trying to improve themselves and trying to get better. The fan reaction, Michigan and Oregon perspective. Let's talk about Michigan first. Michigan fans, they point blank, and I'm not trying to rag on Michigan fans here, but let's just be honest about it. Michigan fans have an obsession with labeling Ohio State players and coaches as excuse makers, probably because right now they really don't care about their bowl game that they're going to play in, the ReliaQuest Bowl against Alabama. And so right now they're focused on continuing to trumpet that win, which I got to be honest, if I was in that position, I'd be doing the same thing to my rival as well. So I'm not saying you're wrong to do that. I'm just looking at it point blank, black and white, and saying that's probably what's going on here is these Michigan fans are trying to get another win on Ohio State by continuing to label their players and coaches as excuse makers, as people who can't own up, who are soft and not tough and yada, 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 all this stuff that we've heard for the past 3 years that at this point it's just become nonsense to, I mean, Ohio State has run the ball, has done so many things. We're not going to get into that. It's just nonsense. But the frequently criticizing Ryan Day for excuse making when actually being able to use any evidence when asked for specific examples is staggering, right? Many Michigan fans will say, well, Ryan Day blamed the weather for why they didn't win in 2021. Where? Where did Ryan Day say that? The truth is he did not. If you ask a Michigan fan to tell you where did he make that excuse, they'll say, oh, yeah, he said it. Okay. Find me a quote. Find me an article. Find me a video of him saying it. And they fail to do so because in reality, it was an excuse that fans made. And it was something that probably at some point got brought up in one of the press conferences of like, oh, yeah, it was snowing that day, so it was hard to throw the ball. It's not an excuse. That's analyzing the game and talking about what happened. The flu that they had, which, we talked about on the other video of Oregon, go check that one out. But the flu they had that CJ Stroud just briefly mentioned, like, oh, yeah, we weren't feeling great because we had the flu in that one. Oh, he's making excuses that they lost. He's not. He just was asked a question about did the team feel 100%. And he said, well, we did have the flu. What do you want him to say? No, we were all great. Well, then he's a liar. So what do you want him to say? But that's kind of the Michigan side of it all, right? The continued rivalry banter and everything else, looking for any possible excuse to latch onto to get one more up on Ohio State because Michigan fans realize it right now. You won the game, but they're not in the playoffs. Ohio State is. And if Ohio State wins this game, then most likely win the national championship, which it'd be hard to take too many blows at a team after they win the national championship. Oregon fans, on the other side, are different as they demand respect after their win, but also are reluctant to acknowledge key moments in the game, like Jeremiah Smith's offensive pass interference that potentially cost Ohio State the game. Look, I was just listening to an Oregon podcast the other day, as I do. I listen to podcasts from all across the Big Ten, try to hear from every single fan base, try to analyze and hear what's going on, try to stay up to date. And the podcast had a segment in it where they talked about how it was clear pass interference, and Jeremiah Smith wants to act like wide receivers can't. This came from another interview question, which we could make another video about if we wanted to, but this came from another interview question earlier this week, and saying, "Oh, well, he thinks that he can't be physical." Well, it was clearly the right call, and it was clear that you made a penalty there, and that's your fault. Well, which is it? Did Jeremiah Smith make the penalty that was his fault, or did the Oregon player make a good play? If you're saying the penalty was correct, then yeah, Jeremiah Smith is one of the reasons why, if not a big reason why, Ohio State lost that game. But if you want to say, oh, well, the penalty wasn't actually a penalty, it was just good defense, then you give him credit. But Oregon did. Let's look at it this way. Oregon did enough to win that game, but point out, like, Howard's comment is not necessarily meant to be taken that way. Where's the truth, right? Where's the truth in all of this? Where does it really lie? The nuanced truth is this: Oregon made great plays to win, and Ohio State made costly mistakes. Games are often decided by which team can capitalize on their opponent's errors rather than perfection, because no team is going to be perfect. The reality is, Oregon made mistakes in that game as well. Ohio State failed to capitalize on them as well as Oregon did. So, the statement, Oregon played well enough to win and they deserve respect for that, is true. The statement that Ohio State beat themselves and made mistakes that they shouldn't have made is also true, right? Is there an absolute that Ohio State only beat themselves and that's the only reason they lost? Of course not. Oregon's a very good football team, and Oregon won that game because they capitalized on those mistakes. But also at the same time, Ohio State made mistakes, and if they didn't make those mistakes, they could have had a much better chance of winning that game. Think about this other game, right? Ohio State versus Notre Dame in 2023. That game happened where both sides blamed mistakes, but the reality was much more complex than that. Kyle McCord throws the ball over the middle of the field. I think it was the Notre Dame safety got his hands on the ball, should have brought it down for an interception. That would have been the end of the game. Instead, he drops the interception. Ohio State drives down the field, gets to the 1 yard line, and punches the ball in as time expires to win that game. Now, Notre Dame fans will tell you, well, we lost the game because he dropped the interception. It's his fault. Ohio State didn't actually win the game. Whereas Ohio State fans tell you, no, wasn't all that easy of an interception. Ohio State won that game. And then you also have the idea of, not the idea, the reality that Oregon, talking a lot about Oregon today, Notre Dame only played 10 guys on that final snap of the game when Chip Trayanum ran the ball into the end zone. So Notre Dame fans do have a point. They lost that game because of player mistakes and coaches' mistakes, but also Ohio State capitalized on those mistakes and won the game on their play. It's a very similar thing to Oregon, Ohio State in 2024 in Week 7. Ohio State made mistakes. Oregon capitalized on those mistakes, and they won. The conclusion is simply this: Howard's comments are not an excuse, and Howard's comments are not meant to take away from Oregon and what they did, although it can feel that way. Howard's comments are rather just a common way that athletes frame losses to stay focused and to motivate themselves to continue to work hard, continue to be better, and not make as many mistakes. Other athletes in various sports do this. J.J. McCarthy did it. If you listen to other interviews, if you talk to other athletes, not even just high-level athletes, but like athletes in high school, right? Oh, we can't beat ourselves. We can't make the mistakes. They say this kind of stuff too. The Rose Bowl will ultimately be determined by this: which team makes fewer mistakes and which team capitalizes on those mistakes. That is where the game will be decided. Whether those mistakes are coaching, whether those mistakes are by the players, whichever team makes mistakes and whichever team is able to capitalize on those mistakes will win the game. The team that makes mistakes and gets those capitalized on will lose the game. Here's my question for you. What do you think? Do you believe Will Howard's comments were excuse making? Am I maybe off on this one? Let me know. Is he simply motivating himself and his team? You think like me and you're like, listen, this is something players will say all the time. Like and subscribe. Definitely appreciate that. Come back for more episodes. Kind of weird time right now with bowl season and everything else. We'll get on a much more consistent schedule later on, but definitely come back and listen to the live shows. You got football with me and Zach, and then you got the Power Rankings basketball episode with me and Kent, and then the Thursday basketball episode, either just me by myself or me with a guest that you can check in on. So thanks so much for watching. For everybody, like and subscribe. We appreciate it. Have a good one.